Okay, so hear me out. You've probably heard of the path of least resistance. Okay, and what it says is that nature prefers for a system to do the thing that requires least amount of energy. Okay, and so the path part actually doesn't have to be a path that you walk, in space necessarily. It doesn't have to be a place and a time where you walk. A system is going to minimize energy use. So if this is something in the real world, you're up here at point A, point B is down there. This is an optional path to get there. Okay, but since you're in the real world, you have gravity happening, and say you don't have a super huge gust of wind going that way or super huge gust of wind going that way, then this is the path of least resistance because there's no reason for the object to travel that path. Okay, that's the physical explanation. Now, what I find more interesting about physics is that it's analogous to our lives and consciousness in the real world, okay? So hear me out. There's also your path as a conscious entity in this world, okay? So you, anytime you're about to do something in the world, there's options. You can do this thing, you can do that thing, you can do the other thing, you can do 1,000 different ways to get there. There's more than one way to skin a cat or whatever, right? That's what they say. So if you've already heard the path of least resistance used in this non-physical way, right? Your being and yourself and your choices that you make in the world, the way it was probably used, the context there was probably like you have a bunch of choices and there's one way to get there that is the least energy for you to spend. So it sort of has a negative connotation with some people because they think it means taking the easy way out or doing the thing that requires the least amount of work. But in actuality, if we uphold the analogy, the life that you live and the person you are and the choices that you make are analogous to the physical system, right? And in the physical system, none of these paths actually ever come true. They're used to calculate things sometimes, but the only path that ever happens in reality, in the real world, physically, is the path of least resistance. That's why we talk about it. That's why it's interesting. It's the only thing we ever see and the only thing we ever measure experimentally. And so if we uphold the analogy, that says that the thing that you're going to end up doing, the choice that you're going to end up making, is determined actually. So it's not that you consider the choices and go with the one that requires the least amount of effort. That's not the point. The point is that you are doomed to inevitably follow one path which the universe has decided costs the least amount of energy, considering a bunch of systems that make up you and your body and your brain and your mind, not just what you think is the easiest route and has the least amount of barriers. Because what you think is the least amount of barriers may not coincide with what the universe thinks is the least amount of barriers, because the barriers you see are all social constructs that you make in your mind's eye, when really there's a bunch of barriers that exist at the atomic level and molecular level, and all the social things too. There's many, many more things that you don't see. So the path of least resistance isn't the easy way out. The path of least resistance is the path that you're inevitably going to take whether you like it or not. And so what that tells you is that you should let Jesus take the wheel. That's what the Christians are talking about when they say let Jesus take the wheel. It's because it's God's plan. I'm not a Christian. It just so happens that the world's major religions happen to get this thing right, which I've noticed is a trend where they get the things right that are analogous with physical processes. It's really interesting, actually. It seems like all the major world religions can agree on a few things, not everything, but the few things they do agree on are principles that are there within nature waiting for us to discover them, rather than subjective, ideological concepts that we create for ourselves. So that brings us to living an examined life, as they call it. This is prevalent in mindfulness, which is popular now, Vipassana meditation, which I suggest. And the idea is that living an examined life means you don't examine all of the possibilities of how things could have gone yesterday or how things could go in the future and try to pick the right one that's going to work best for you, because you don't have all of the answers, you don't have all of these values that you need to make the calculation. So what you do, living an examined life, is realize that you're already on the path of least resistance, whether you like it or not, right? And you're just the log flowing down the river with the river. You examine life, meaning simply examine the things that are happening. Simply observe all of the happenings instead of trying to predict what's going to happen and trying to force the world into the world the way that you want it to be, and trying to choose a different path besides the one that's actually inevitably going to happen to you whether you like it or not.